Welcome, everyone. Hello. Good morning from Southern California. I'm Jamie Kelly, Chief Philanthropy Officer here at the National Park Foundation. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Inside the Parks virtual program. We have so many park-loving guests joining us, and like you, I've been looking forward to today's conversation about World of Wonders with author Aimee Nezhukumatathil. At the heart of today's program are our Champion Society members and other donors whose support for our national parks safeguards our natural, cultural, and historical heritage. So far this year, over 260,000 people like you have provided critical, unrestricted support for our national parks. We are truly grateful for your generosity. I also want to thank those online today who have created a lasting legacy for parks through their estate plans, our 1916 Society members. Your intentional gesture helps to ensure the future of national parks. One final shout out. Our thanks go out to Milkweed Editions, the publisher of today's book topic, World of Wonders, and our partner in producing today's program. And now it is such a pleasure and honor to introduce today's special guest. She is an award-winning poet, beloved essayist, and one of our most powerful advocates for wonder, Aimee Nezhukumatathil. Aimee is the author of the best-selling book World of Wonders, in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments, to the subject of today's conversation. This luminous collection of essays invites us to rediscover the natural world and our place within it through a lens of joy, curiosity, and cultural insight. Her newest book is Bite by Bite, a collection of essays demonstrating the links between food, cooking, and eating together, which fuels emotions and memories while knitting together our cultural connections. Aimee is also the author of 4 acclaimed poetry collections, including Oceanic, and her work has been featured in many publications such as Poetry Magazine and the New York Times Magazine. As a writer, teacher, and nature lover, Aimee reminds us that the outdoors belongs to all of us, and that wonder is not a luxury, it's essential. Whether she's writing about fireflies or catalpa trees, Aimee helps us see the world and each other with more compassion and awe. So, Aimee, on behalf of the National Park Foundation and lovers of wonder all over the world, we are delighted to have you here. And I am honored to turn the conversation over to my friend and colleague, Jennifer Harris, the National Park Foundation's Senior Vice President of Philanthropy, who will lead today's discussion. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, Jen. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, honestly, we're so thrilled to have you. It's really special. So many of our donors, and myself included, we've really been looking forward to this conversation. So let's get right to it.
Absolutely.
Your book, World of Wonders, it's really a stunning tribute to the very personal connections and inner strengths we find in nature. So I wanted to start by asking you about what was the original inspiration to create the book? And can you tell me a little bit about how the project came to life?
Absolutely. Well, as you and Jamie know, I'm a poet first and foremost. And but I always had a kind of this nerdy love, just full on love relationship with the outdoors. Whereas it's not just I liked being outside, I love knowing the names of things, the hows and the whys, to the point where my parents, who are the first naturalists I know, I ever met, they would send me to the library. Like with all my questions, they finally were like, I don't know all that much about narwhals. Why don't you ask a librarian, And the way this book came about is it was kind of an accident in some ways. These were this is a collection of about 30 very short essays, very lyrically crafted essays designed for my children who were age 5 and 8 at the time. And they started off as bedtime stories, kind of, and I never wanted to, from their questions. So a lot of it was, Mommy, did you ever feel lonesome when you were small? We had just moved to Mississippi. And so I would tell them a little bit about my life, but I didn't want to end it in that way. I said, but narwhals always have a pod. They always keep together. They search for one if one of them gets lost, things like that. So we're narwhals. Eventually, I started kind of gathering them up, and it was my husband, Dustin, who's also a writer, who was looking over them one day and said, these need to be published. And I was like, oh, what are you talking about? This is a kid's book just for, a 5 and 8-year-old. And he's like, no, I think if you tweak them a little bit, it's a larger audience wants them. And as he is with much everything in my life, when I started sending them out, they were gobbled up and published right away. So the thing is milkweed has I cannot say enough about milkweed. And there's my boys now. Oh my goodness. My then 8-year-old is now off to college in 2 weeks. And there's my youngest Jasper. And there's Dustin. So this is at Zion, of course. Yeah. Um, the thing is, I got so many rejections from the manuscript of this book. And Milkweed, who is a champion of kind of stories that haven't been told before, they were the ones to say, abso-freaking-lutely, we want this collection. And yes, we love your kooky idea that it's going to be illustrated. So came out a roundabout way, but I'll always be grateful for Milkweed for championing stories that haven't been told. A lot of publishers told me there's nothing like it right now, so we don't think it'll sell. There needs to be a comparable is what they call it in the publishing world. There's no
Yeah.
comp for this book. And I was like, yeah, there's no comps. But that's why, it needs to be out there. No one
And I,
agreed except Milkweed.
yeah, and I think a lot of people on this call who share that deep passion for the natural world probably would argue with like every day walking in a park is a comp. Every
Yes,
day we
yeah.
get to celebrate that joy of the natural world and what brings us closer to ourselves and everyone around us. Can you talk about maybe a moment about a memorable experience in one of the national parks that deeply influenced you in your writing?
Absolutely. I think we have a picture of it maybe. My elementary school years were spent in Phoenix, Arizona, in the suburbs. So kind of the very first national park I went to was the Grand Canyon. Anytime we had relatives from India or the Philippines, my mother's from the Philippines, my dad is from India. There we go. Oh gosh. Oh yeah, I had to have been maybe third grade, maybe fourth grade. Oh my goodness, it's wild to see it on the big screen. And yeah, and there's my sweet dad and my mom. Um, Boy, that just takes me back. That's like early 80s right there. Um, I think, of course, when you're in third grade and someone says, "Hey, let's go to a national park," it's already a bunch of questions like, what are we going to do there? Do they have rides? Things like that. And when my parents said, no, there's no rides, we are going to look at this and you're going to, enjoy it. Just trust me. I have to admit I was a little dubious. I didn't know any better, but I think even as a little girl, I still can remember it. It takes my breath away. Making that walk to the edge of the North Rim or something and peering over and seeing the expanse. Maybe the Grand Canyon is it's one of those gateway national park experiences. Like once you see that, that's where everything gets ignited, and then I just realized, oh, there's dozens more of these, and they're all different. I think that ignited me from a very young age. I have to see them all as whenever I can. That has been my lifelong goal is to seeing them all because we're used to being inside sometimes with air conditioning in Arizona, but when you're outside at the Grand Canyon, the air is cool. It was just this overwhelming sense of gratitude and wonder that I think has never left me ever. And so I have the Grand Canyon and my parents to thank for that.
It's wonderful. In your book, you actually talk about some synchronous fireflies in the Great Smoky Mountains. And I'm wondering, like, can you share a little bit of that inspiration and that moment of being in the park and seeing that?
Absolutely. One of the things I wanted to capture in this book that was different than some of the other books that I had read about the outdoors is it always just seemed, first of all, they were always guys mostly. And it was always something like, I always love the national parks and I don't wear makeup and I don't listen to music and I don't have crushes and I don't, that kind of thing. And it didn't seem real to me. I mean, that's great if that's the case, but I have to admit, in that chapter, when I'm talking about fireflies, the first time I encountered them was in the Great Smoky Mountains. And I am slightly embarrassed to admit, but I always want to keep it real. In junior high, it's hard to tell a bunch of junior high girls, hey, we're going to see fireflies for spring break or for early summer break, that kind of thing. I definitely was an MTV girl and thought, well, all of my friends are going to the beach, that kind of thing. So I could see the excitement from my dad. We're going to the Great Smoky Mountains. Trust me, you'll see these bugs. They glow. I have to admit, all I wanted to do was just be inside and watch MTV and paint my toenails. But again, I'm so grateful for that extra nudge to go out there and experience. My dad knew even at the time to put a red film over the flashlights to not disturb. And now there's firefly tours and everything. There's a whole boom. But at the time, that was very unusual. It was super unusual to have an Asian family tiptoeing through the dark, and park their little, their picnic chairs out and just watch all of a sudden the forest have a heartbeat, a visual heartbeat of ba-boom, ba-boom, and it was it's still again, just one of the most magical moments in my life. And I'm glad my dad didn't listen to say, oh, what? Everyone's going to the beach. Everyone's going to Disney World. It's embarrassing. You're taking us to caves. He took us to Mammoth Caves. He took us to Great Smoky Mountains. But it actually, there's no way he could have known this, but it changed my life. And I'm here talking to you because he insisted this is something that you need to see as a kid. He fostered that love of wonder and the outdoors as a young kid. So I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, it's great because I think that the national parks weave so beautifully our human history, our family history, and the future together. Like I just found a picture of my great grandmother in redwoods, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just there. That's amazing. So, um, anyway, one of the things I love about your writing is how it blends the sense of awe mingled with science and memoir and poetry. And can you just talk about how you blend those through your writing about nature and the outdoors?
Sure. Well, the easy answer is I'm a nerd. And the other part is I just love reading and kind of, I'm an English professor, but my kind of not so dirty little secret is I actually read more science and nature books than I do straight up literature, and poetry. And I think that's because I've just never, since I could read, the stories that fascinated me the most is exploring inside a volcano or checking out this swamp or scuba diving and things like that. So those were the narratives and the adventures that ignited this kind of this sense of wonderment and oh my gosh, I don't feel alone anymore. One of the things I tell my students is when wonder becomes a practice, you don't really feel alone anymore. So this is not like I just wake up every day and think, aha, everything is fine and happy in the world. It is a practice. And what I mean by that is uh to stay curious, find something that you're always curious about. And for me, that just happened to be the outdoors. I wasn't satisfied with just seeing, oh, that's a pretty tree with white flowers. I needed to know, oh, that's a catalpa, and the seeds look like long cigars, or, things like that. The names of things are so important. And I think once you get to know the inhabitants, the less you want to, or the more you want to protect it. So for example, if you know that there are Western tanagers, which we just saw in Yellowstone, that are this brilliant orange yellow flash in the sky, why would you ever allow forests where they live to be cut, things like that. So it's a way to kind of I mean, that's all the benefits in some ways, but it's just being curious. You're never bored. You're never bored once you get to learn more about the inhabitants of these national parks.
I love what you said about having wonder be a practice. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's so especially important, when we go out into nature, when we explore a national monument or a national park, bringing that sense of curiosity and wonder with us. But I love it even more for everyday life. And
Mhm.
speaking of that, what kind of nature related, if any, writing rituals might you have? Like any places specifically that spark your inspiration?
Yeah, as a mom of two teen boys, and actually this was the case before I became a mom, I learned that it's almost impossible to have like a writing routine. When I was in grad school, I had, you always hear of, again, usually male writers who are like, oh, I wake up and write for 4 hours, and then I go off in the woods for a while, things like that. That just, I was always thinking like, what is your wife doing? Or what do they feel about this? Or, the famous thing about Thoreau's mom was sharpening his pencils, things like that. I never wanted my kids or my husband to ever feel like, oh, Amy's writing time is is first and foremost, and then we're second. So that's just me. So this is from a very personal thing. Everybody has to do their own thing. But I love writing in coffee shops. I love writing under a tree. I love writing poolside. I love writing geyser side. Again, we just came back from Yellowstone. So I've just learned if you become too precious about it, you won't write. At least I won't. If I had to have like, oh, every day at 2 o'clock, that's when I write, and I have a special candle and a tea. No, no, at least the moms I know would not be able to write. There's always something. And especially when my kids were younger, all they'd have to do is say, Mom, let's go on a walk in the woods. Of course, I'm gonna put my stuff down and walk in the woods. But I do love writing with, oh gosh, yes, here's Yellowstone and here's Grand Prismatic. And that is, by the way, as people who've gone there see, I think I always doubted it until I saw it with my own eyes. That is an untouched. There's no color correction on that. That is what it looks like. And
Yeah,
here's
and I love it that these are your pictures, so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
great.
these are my own pictures. So we just saw it on a day where there was not a whole lot of steam. It was just this. Yeah, how could you ever be bored looking at this? And just as a side note, I
Yeah,
think one thing that you asked about my writing practice, one thing that I try to do is I mean, this is my pencil that I was writing with this morning. I love black wing pencils. I'm still kind of old school, as my students say. I love just a notebook, a composition book, and a pencil. And that's all you need. What I love about writing is that anybody can do it. You do not need a $10,000 harp. You do not need expensive materials. It's a pen, and a notebook, and you can. I've trained myself, especially since having kids. I could do it while waiting for tennis practice. I could do it outside, inside, with a thunderstorm, no thunderstorm, that kind of thing.
that's great. I learned that many readers of your book, World of Wonders, found it to be a source of comfort because it was published during the pandemic. And I'm wondering, when you were researching and writing it, if you also felt, that similar source of solace.
Hmm. Yeah, I did because it was always a close reader. I mentioned before, these were originally kind of bedtime stories. A
Right.
close reader will still see that tenderness of a mom talking to two elementary school kids. And then when I revised it, I was thinking of my grown friends, my mentors. So, but that voice is still, it's as close to me, Amy, as possible. From poetry, I'm always writing through a speaker, the characters, the personas and poems. But this book was the closest to my heart. And I think because I say over and over again, I'm not a scientist. I was just imagining talking to my friends. So I think, and there's so many amazing books written by scientists that are great, that are informative. This is one, I think. you'd have to ask my readers again, but it was almost more of just like, did you do you know this about dancing frogs? Did you see this about a vampire squid? It was more of just like a bubbly, enthusiastic friend wanting to share that knowledge, not to lecture. I took off my professor hat, not to lecture, not to say, look at how much I know about narwhals, but it was more of like, holy smokes, did you know that there are fireflies that are synchronous? Um, and it was never a judgment. It was never also anything to put people down like, hey, if you don't know this, you're a loser, or what have you done with your life? It was more of the opposite. I think I wrote it with like that spirit of what happens to me when someone talks about something they love, it's contagious. And so that's my hope too. The bonus is that people get curious about what is catalpatry? What do flamingos look like when they're sleepy? Think that kind of thing. That's the
Yeah.
bonus. But it was more of just like, how can you be bored on a planet like this?
Right. Circling back again, to practicing wonder,
Mhm.
um, we get so many just amazingly beautiful notes from our donors and supporters about their family trips and their experiences. And I think part of the magic of going to a national park is the memories of that national park staying with us and carrying it forward in our lives. So I'm curious about, how do you cultivate habits of wonder and curiosity in day-to-day routines?
That's so good. I mean, on a very practical note, and I see this with my students, I see this with my own kids, and I also include myself on that too. Part of it is unplugging a little bit. Um, that picture of little Amy at the Grand Canyon did not know what an iPad was, nor I had parents who I watched PBS and that was basically it, Um, so I didn't have the attachment to screens that we all do. Neither did my parents at the time. They were very much like newspapers, TV, like my sons think this is funny to know that a TV guide was printed. They think that's hilarious. They just don't even have that concept. So it's going back to being unplugged on a very practical basis. And so that's something that we can do in our daily lives. And now it doesn't mean we're here on a webinar. There are so many incredible things that having a FaceTime to my parents, it's something that a cell phone allows us to do. But one of the negative things it does is it doesn't allow us to be bored. So one
Right.
thing that I try to encourage with anybody in my close circle, with my students too, is to give yourself time to daydream. And it might mean, I know it sounds silly, it might mean scheduling time to daydream because we're so connected. Some of us are so connected to our phones. Some of us are connected to meetings. And even while you're waiting in line at the grocery, it's so easy to pick up your phone and see what your aunts and uncles are doing or see what cousin Bob is doing in California. Let yourself daydream a little bit. And that's one of the things that I saw just 2 weeks ago in the Tetons and at Yellowstone is that it was, for the most part, I'd say 99% screen free. It was amazing to see that. You don't see that anywhere, from Disney World to um, even movie theaters. Someone's always got a screen out. But at the national park, people had their screens out, but it was to take a quick picture and put it away. And so I think nobody was scrolling. I didn't see anybody scrolling on things during our national park trips. And so I think that's going to be key for people to take a little bit of that. Yeah, no one was watching a YouTube video while we were floating on the Snake River, that kind of thing. So whatever, and we were able to talk. I saw other families having picnics and talking. And I know it sounds silly, but when you go to restaurants, and you know this, and you see people and kids staring at a screen, basically even through a meal, that kind of breaks my heart a little bit. So I'm definitely not anti-screen, but one thing that we can do is let yourself daydream. Remember, and you don't have to be an artist to need that daydreaming time. All humans need time to daydream and think and reflect. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And one of the great things at NPF is the mission and the call to protect and conserve these amazing places. And, I think that also includes storytelling, because we have to talk about these great places and how they intersect with our lives. And I'm wondering in your book, your takeaway is like, how do you dig deeper into that commitment from a personal perspective about, you know, the work to protect these wildlife ecosystems?
Mm. Yeah, I love that question. It's such a beautiful question. I think it's just the national parks are, I think, one of the best things about this country. And what I mean by that is that um, national parks are kind of like being outdoors in these protected places is kind of the great equalizer. Like national parks, the Tetons doesn't care if I have the best hiking gear or not. You don't need to summit in order to care for it. Um, but to have that space where you can see miles and miles and miles of places without big box stores. And you see instead people having picnics with their families or solo. I was so amazed and impressed and in awe of solo women hikers on their own, people of all ages, all backgrounds, all abilities. I saw I saw this amazing man. I just hope I have half of his spirit at Yellowstone, just rolling in a wheelchair on the boardwalks and just on a mission. I just love that it's kind of a big equalizer for people, you know? And so I think um, if we lose our, I know I'm probably almost speaking to the choir here, but I think uh, all you need in the national parks is curiosity. You know what I mean? And if you treat the national park as a one giant outdoor library, you don't need to know all the answers, but it might spark later when you're home and have access to books or the internet, you know, then to be like, what was that shimmering tree that always seemed like it was applauding when I walked by? Oh, that's a quaking aspen, you know, and then you just might be, I need to have. I need to be, I need to see it again. I want my children to see it again. And, you know, I want, if I'm mentoring a kid down the street and they don't know what a quaking aspen is, or if they can't identify five birds, maybe I'll take it upon myself instead of just driving and honking by to say, hey, do you want to go on a walk with me? I mean, I think the beauty of the national parks is that the possibilities are endless, what you do with that awe and wonderment after. You know, so it's really, but I feel like it's so contagious. I don't know anybody. For example, in my 50 years, I literally don't know anybody. And this is hard to say with anything. There's movies that people don't like, there's entertainment that people don't like. But I have not met a single person who's been to a national park and just said, eh, not for me. You
I
know,
honestly can say that also. I've never heard of that.
right?
But one question I have too is like, to capture the moment or, when you're out in nature, do you have any tips for journaling? Because I know, again, a lot of our supporters like to go out into nature and journal or take photographs. And, how do you help cultivate kind of that curiosity through journaling out in parks and nature?
Yes, I love that question so much because it speaks to my educator heart. And we're about to start school here in Oxford, Mississippi in about 3 weeks. And that's one of my favorite things about my job is getting people to not, I always say I don't teach them necessarily how to write, but to remember. I mean, I do that, but what I love is to getting them to remember that they love to write. And I know even if you really, even if the people who are like, oh, I hate writing, I'm in science, you know, I'm in math, I'm in economics, there's no place for me. No, I think everybody remembers what it's like to make that first recording, maybe in all capital letters with a pencil, of just to observe what you see. I see a big tree, you know, things like that. And it's funny that you mentioned that because in Tetons, two amazing things happened. The first is we came across a couple actually, and the woman had a blank notebook out and she was tapping her pen. She had a pen, was tapping her pen. She's like, I just don't know what to write about. And I just couldn't, my sons were like a little embarrassed. They're like, Mom, let's go. I just couldn't let it go. I was like, hey, I happen to hear you say you didn't know what to write. And so the exercise I gave her is the exercise I'm going to give you now. It's called the Write the Rainbow. Right, the rainbow means, that whole the Roy G. Biv. It's the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, what is it, indigo, violet. Write that down on the left side of a sheet of paper or in a blank notebook. So R for red, and then just it's kind of almost like a scavenger hunt. What do you see in front of you that is red? Maybe you don't see it right in front of you, but if you keep walking a little bit, there's gonna be something red. Write that down. Um, and what do you see that's yellow? If you're in arches, take your pick. Everything is red there. What's yellow? Do that for every color. And it's kind of like you don't need to be a poet to write that. You're literally just observing what you see. But then if you want to take it a little bit deeper, then go back for each color and then kind of open it up to what memory or anecdote do you have for that? So for example, yellow, I'm thinking of the yellow bowling ball sized rocks that I was trying not to slip on in the Narrows, which is one of my favorite all-time hikes at Zion National Park. I was trying to, you have to walk across, it's in the water, you have to walk across these rocks that are basically slippery bowling balls. So they're yellow, and I remember that color. It was this muddy yellow, but I remember even thinking, and that was last year, 2 years ago. Um, gosh, I hope my kids will remember this, or oh, my eldest is going off to college, and then just start just going back from there. Or what was his first national park? That kind of thing. So just start with the rainbow. Everyone can start with the rainbow, and then you can dig in a little deeper. And that's anybody can do at any skill level.
Amazing. So we do have a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to kind of pivot so that
Good.
we make sure we're inclusive of everyone
For
joining
sure.
on and asking their questions. I think first up is someone's heard about your newest book. So could you share just a little bit about Bite by Bite?
Absolutely, absolutely. Bite by Bite is a collection. It's a little bit bigger. It's about 50 um, fruits and spices and vegetables and even food like street food, like gyro sandwiches, all with kind of like the natural history of each food item. And then there's a little anecdote about my own personal life as well. So it's not a memoir exactly. It's not a cookbook. As I said with World of Wonders, I'm not a scientist. This one, I am not a chef, although I do love cooking so much. It's more of just, I am a student of the planet. And so I just wanted to know, where do we get vanilla, for example? And I use vanilla all the time when I'm baking. And it goes through the kind of the histories with that. Some of them get complicated, like you can imagine where we get sugar and sugar cane and maybe some dark moments in our country's past. But then some of them are also bright and trying to satisfy a family old argument is which is the sweetest mango in the world, and with parents from India and the Philippines, they have been arguing that their whole lives. My mangoes are sweeter in the Philippines, India is sweeter. So it's called Bite by Bite, and they're all it's a blend of natural history and memoir of different foods and spices and vegetables.
That's wonderful. So another question from one of our great guests is World of Wonders was absolutely a healing moment during the pandemic, as well as find the perks behind them. And her question relates to, or their question to encouraging kids and our younger selves. How do you preserve the open mind of heart and wonder as your children move through teen and young adult life? Just to make sure you're helping cultivate that, I think.
Oh, that's such a good question. And that's, gosh, one of the most near and dear subjects to my heart is how do you don't have to, I found you don't have to teach kids how to wonder, how to have curiosity. They always do. How many times have I heard why, or what is this? Why? Or look, look, look. It's that high school, middle school age where it starts to fade off if you're not paying attention. And I am not the expert. I am not a parenting expert by any means, but the simplest thing I could say is to give the opportunity. And it does not need to come from a place of huge financial expense. But if you have, and I come from parents who my mother worked 80 hours a week. She was a psychiatrist, and my dad was a respiratory therapist for in the NICU unit for babies. So if a premature baby was having breathing problems, it doesn't matter if I'm at my birthday party or not, he has to go. So, and still they found time. So I have no patience when people say I don't have time. If you have time to scroll on your phone, that kind of thing while your kids are bouncing around, you've got time. Just make time. If my parents can make time and they had huge um, medical emergencies that they had to attend to, um, I feel like they were just such great role models for me. So I would say, and it doesn't need to be huge just to show up. Like there's some national park that you could drive to, make it a road trip instead of doing like maybe the flashier Disney or beach trip, or maybe you can do both and shoot for a Florida vacation and then also go to the beach, but maybe do Everglades in December or something like that. I would say just making a point to take walks outside. That's something small that I know, especially during the pandemic, I couldn't travel a lot. We made sure to have our daily walk, and that was so beautiful. I feel like talking with my friends, almost everybody I knew, if they were able, they had some sort of outdoor time. One of the great lessons from that time is like, what can you do to keep that spirit? Everybody had that outdoor time. We were eating outside. We were making time for picnics. We were reconnecting with our neighbors across the street. That's something that you can do, pandemic or not, that you can make time for.
It's so true. So we have a few more minutes, and just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question, along the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says Q&A question mark, and feel free to tap on that and add your own question. I have another one. It's about, do you have any upcoming work?
I do, I do. Actually, this was inspired by my times in the dark sky national parks. So that's Arches. I mean, almost every national park is a dark sky environment, and that is one that has been certified where you can actually see the stars and not have star blindness, meaning like where stars are available once the moon is gone as well, and just how to get people not afraid of nighttime as a place of worry or something to fear. And that's a book of poems. I haven't done a book of poems since 2018. It's called Night Owl. And it's funny, it's one of in the acknowledgments, I'm thanking all these different rangers and national park folks for answering all my questions. That's coming out in March of 2026.
And someone else has asked if you'd consider writing part 2 of World of Wonder.
Oh, that has been asked. One of these days I might. There's been, I had a list of 200 animals and I whittled it down to just under 30. And then I'm always getting more ideas like, oh, why didn't I do this? But even when I had the book in my hand, I had a list easily of 20, and that changes almost weekly. Like I could have added this, I could have added this. So we'll see, we'll see. I'm never gonna say never. Right now I'm turning to poems, but I hope so. It was so much fun writing it, and I love interacting with readers on what their world animal of wonder is or their plant of wonder too.
That's another one. Are there any particular parks or wild places that's still on your wonder list that you're really hoping to get to or visit someday soon?
100%, 100%. All the ones in Alaska. That's
Just all of
that's everybody,
them.
all of them. It doesn't matter which one. I would like to ideally, hit more than one when I'm up there. Alaska's my number one. I'm a tropical gal at heart. So, I've seen basically everything in the South, anything that's hot. I've seen basically, I haven't seen Big Bend. Big Bend is that's another dark sky that I wasn't able to make it. But any of the ones in Alaska, I thought we could make it this time around, and when you don't realize till you're there how far everything is away. We were in Yellowstone and Tetons. We thought we could make it to Glacier, and we're like, this is a little too farther than it looks on the map. So yeah,
Glacier, Denali. It's
exactly. I know Denali. Yeah, yeah.
fun.
But that's the beauty of it is that it's a life. What I love about the national parks is that if you start young, as I did, it becomes this national It becomes like a lifelong engagement. It's not like, oh, I'm done now at age 40, done, that kind of thing. Or I'm done for my kids. I'm done. My parents took me to all of them. No, it becomes like, again, I don't know anybody who's gone to one park and then that's it. They always want to come back. I have a list of things I need to go back to Yosemite and, things like that. So many parks I want to come back to.
Yeah. So a great question from another teacher. As one teacher, another, thank you for sharing your insights and enthusiasm for your students in Mississippi. What level do you teach, and do you have opportunities to take your students into the field for firsthand experience in nature?
Absolutely. Well, my official job has me teaching at the university. So I teach graduate students and undergraduates here at the University of Mississippi. But I teach anywhere from when I go and visit schools, I visit anywhere from preschool to senior citizen groups. And that's something that is near and dear to me. And I've been teaching preschool and elementary school before I ever had kids. Like I said, sometimes. Uh, Elementary school in particular, well, actually, all different grades, but I'd say there's something special about fourth graders and fifth graders in particular, where um, most of them haven't been affected by like what things are cool, what things aren't, and they're just unabashed, super opinionated, and yet super exuberant about the outdoors and still remembering uh, with glee what it's like to just feel so happy and at peace outside and all the places where they messed up or fell out of a tree or got stung by hornets. They have no qualms about sharing all of that. I love
That's
it. Mhm.
so one last quick question. Um, what is it that you would love to, if you could choose it, the one thing that you would leave your readers with um, from this book, World of Wonders? Like, what would be that key takeaway?
Gosh, that's such a great question. When I wrote World of Wonders, I loved fireflies. I knew a lot about them. Just this past May, though, I became certified to lead firefly tours here at Mississippi State Parks. And I think just even in writing my last book, I've been more aware of how important dark skies are. And so it's not just I did mention that in World of Wonders, but something that I would leave the readers with more is that no matter where you live, you do not need to light up the sky with 10 million lights around your house or apartment building, and there's actually been studies that show that lights do not actually equal safety. And there are more, what I witnessed in Yellowstone, there are more stars in Yellowstone than any possible likes that you can collect on social media. So collect those stars with your bring a loved one, collect those stars from your life. It doesn't have to be, oh, you have to do this weekend, but collect the stars while you still can see them more than any likes on social media is what I would say.
That's that's wonderful. Well, that's kind of bringing up to the end of this program. But first, I really want to thank you for joining us today, and also to Milkweed Editions and the supporters on here with us as well. This has been just delightful, and we're so thrilled. And of course, to all of our donors and supporters who join us every time. We so appreciate everything you do for us and for our national parks. Thank you for your generosity and kindness and great support. I know we'll be back in the fall and we'll be featuring our new president and CEO, Jeff Reinbold. So thank you, everyone. And this was wonderful. So thank you, Aimee.
Thank you all. And to all of the National Park supporters, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for investing in literature and the national parks. I never dreamed that I could be a writer about the outdoors. So I'm just so glad for this opportunity to share my love of the outdoors and writing with you all. Thank you.
Terrific. Take care.
Take care. Bye.